Hi there. So, if you're listening to this video, you're interested in becoming a retail energy provider, or more precisely, a retail electricity supplier. And that is great. It's an awesome business to get into. But I have found that with clients I've worked with in my own experience, that there's some things that at the start you may not be aware of and really should understand the ramp up period that's required to become a retail provider and be able to sell your first kilowatt hour of electricity. So let me go through the steps that you need to take and then some insights that I might have about that ramp up period. So first of all, aside from getting, of course, your LLC created and your business license in whatever states that you want to do business in, you also have to get a license from the state commission in the states that you want to do business in. And I provided the application forms in a table that you can access that helps you understand what the application process is like. Now, in the beginning of deregulation, the licensing process was probably a lot less rigorous. But as time has gone on, and unfortunately the industry has seen a lot of bad actors, the review process has become much more stringent. And so they're asking for a lot more documentation than they used to. They're also looking for a lot more in terms of qualifications, financial as well as technical and managerial. So assuming you get your application for the state or states that you want to do business in, you need to go through that and outline all the information that you're going to need to put together to respond to the application process. And it may take quite some time compiling that information. But I will say that it is something that you can do internally. In fact, you're going to probably do a better job than an external consultant trying to extract that information from you. I would be my recommendation that you charge someone within your organization to be responsible for that part of the process. In addition to then submitting your license and perhaps dealing with back and forth in terms of follow-up questions, there is also something that you need to get in terms of a membership, and that is a membership in the ISO, the Independent System Operator. That's usually a requirement under the licenses to be able to do business. And an ISO is simply an entity that's created for a particular state or a geographic region that manages all of the market transactions and the transmission of wholesale power through that region or state. And you have to apply to become a member. There's an application for that. And again, it's not terribly complicated, not too bad there. It's more there in that case, it's more about financial security, making sure the ISO says that you can, not pose any liability to them. You can run that application process concurrently with the license process. So at least, there's some dovetail there in terms of the time periods. Then you also will need to know that in each of the states where you want to do business, you will be doing business in various service territories for the local distribution companies. And for each of those, you're going to have to enter into agreements, coordination agreements, membership agreements. They're coined different terms. But basically, it's an agreement to abide by the terms and conditions of the tariffs and to work with the local distribution utility. Now, also, most importantly, a part of that local distribution utility licensing and contractual arrangement is that you have to do what they call EDI testing. And EDI testing refers to the exchange of data between your company and the distribution company, who will basically be conducting a number of market transactions, such as enrolling customers and basically disconnecting them in Texas, for example, exchange of information about usage data so that you can prepare your billing statement either to be ultimately issued by the utility in sort of the PJM area or you're by yourself as a billing entity in the state of Texas. So that EDI testing is a little tricky. You're talking about the penny test or flight testing. Each of those utilities may offer that EDI flight testing only certain times of the years or only a certain number of times a year, and you have to sign up to become a part of that next flight test. Some cases, if there's a lot of companies who've signed up for that flight testing and there's a cap on how many customers they can deal with, that can be postponed for up to 6 months before you even get a chance to do the flight testing. So when you're looking at your critical path here of being able to sell that first kilowatt hour of electricity, you've got to remember that in addition to the licensing process, the ISO membership process, and the distribution company contract process, there's the EDI testing. And so, in some utilities within a particular state, you may be able to get right on top of it and immediately get EDI testing within 30 days. In some cases that I've seen, some utilities are saying that you had to wait 6 months before you could get on a particular flight testing that they were doing in the future because they had so many other flight tests they were already doing. So that's something to be cognizant of, that, if you're starting up this business, it could be already as much as 6 months, to 9 months before you've accomplished all of those steps. Finally, you will also, even in Texas, probably be required to get a FERC market-based rate authority. So that requires another application process to FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And although the state of Texas and ERCOT are not regulated by FERC per se, the reality is that whether you buy power at wholesale, most probably you're going to be buying power for customers where you're going to hedge and you're going to buy excess power at times to make sure that you've got your load covered. And as a result of that power that you don't use because the customer didn't use it, you have to sell back into the market. And the minute you sell electricity back into the wholesale market, that's when FERC has jurisdiction, and you're going to need market-based rate authority. So that's another license application process. One that, in that case, I would recommend getting a consultant or a law firm to help you with the FERC MBR. It's a little more complicated in the demonstration of showing about horizontal and vertical monopolies and control. And so it's a little tricky. Although, having said that, you could probably get a lot of the data together by going to the FERC website, and in their eDocket system, you can actually locate the latest and greatest in terms of a filing that was made for MBR, Market-Based Rate Authority, by a retail energy company. And frankly, it's kind of formulaic. And if you go through it, you can pick out a lot of the information. You could probably even prepare some of a rough draft that you would then, give to your outside counsel to finalize and polish and do all of the magic that they do. But, again, it saves money, and you won't have to use outside counsel for, the basic block and tackling until you absolutely need it, which here at Retail Energy Wizard, I'm trying to encourage you to do as much as possible on your own, because one, you're going to do a better job of it because it's your personal knowledge. You know what the facts are, but also because you really don't want to pay an expensive lawyer to do something that, frankly, a well-educated person could put together. You don't want to pay $600 an hour to do some basic drafting of documents. You want to wait until they actually need to give the final input and do the filing for you. So it's a little bit of divergent here in terms of the discussion. So just to repeat, Beside your business license in each state, you're going to need to get, again, a commission license to sell power in that state. You're going to need to get an agreement with the local distribution companies that you want to serve in those states and get EDI testing done. You're also going to want to get a membership in the ISO, and then you're going to need your FERC market-based rate authority. So all of that, most of it can be done simultaneously, but it can drag on, and you want to get those all started at the same time so you don't waste any time. So in conclusion on that is, like, you can now see that if you started on January 1, beginning these filings, preparing for these filings, going back and forth with the regulators on questions that they may have and documentation, it could literally take you anywhere from 6 months to a year before you might get all of the documentation you need lined up to be able to sell that first kilowatt hour. In some states, make it a little more difficult. For example, in New York, you have to do your EDI testing first and get approved by a utility before you can even submit the license application. That's kind of unusual. The other states don't do it that way. Many states require that you demonstrate that you've gotten your EDI testing completed and approved sometime after the license has already been granted. And you just notify the commission when that's done, and then you can go ahead and sell your first kilowatt hour of electricity. So, having said that, one mistake I've seen clients make is that they go and they launch their company, and they hire their management team, and they hire their personnel, and they start paying them salaries. And what happens is a lot of these people are basically sitting around. There's some work they can do to sort of prep the business, but you're paying an awful lot in terms of salaries and overhead just in the first year without any ability to sell a kilowatt hour of energy. So, you might want to consider hiring a very much a skeleton crew in the beginning, with at least one person who you feel comfortable with making these filings and trying to do as much of the work yourself, and get your licenses in place first, and your EDI testing done. So your major hiring may not even be done till the sort of end of the first year, because you're not going to need customer service until you have a customer. So why hire customer service people to sit around for a year? And that's a mistake I've actually seen. And in fact, it caused a situation where the entire project was abandoned because too much money was spent on management salaries in the first year and nothing to show for it and to cover the costs. So that's something to give careful consideration to when you're starting up a retail energy company, is that there is quite a long ramp up period before you can actually sell your first kilowatt hour of energy. Now, going back to all of these processes, all of these license applications, I mean, they're asking for a lot of detailed company information, and it will deal with things like managerial expertise, technical expertise, operational expertise. And you can do that by hiring people who have the resumes to demonstrate that they have that particular expertise. You can also delegate it to third parties, but then you're going to need to demonstrate that the third parties have that expertise. And that can all be done internally by one of your people. It could be a director of regulatory affairs. It could be done even by your COO, because it's just a fact-based documentation of all this information. And if you set it up in a logical way, for example, in a table, and you break it down into the parts, and then you have fields where you can collect all the information, resumes, and narratives about how you're going to operate the business with respect to, let's say, supply, risk management. You want all that together, and then only then may you want to go out to outside counsel or a consultant to sort of package it all up into a nice filing. But honestly, even then, if you've got an experienced director of regulatory affairs or a COO, these filings with the regulators are not difficult to make. Most of them can be done electronically through certain portals, or you file a certain number of copies, and you just muddle through it, and you go back and forth with the regulator about information that they may want. You don't need to pay for the expense of a very high hourly rate attorney or even a consultant. And I think one of the reasons that it's good is to have your own internal people put the license together, is that they then will know, more than anybody else, what went into this license application, what things were promised, and understand the requirements that the regulators may want, and things that got them comfortable. So you're working for a much more intelligent view than, say, a third-party consultant, eliciting all this information independently from different people, and you really don't even know when into your license application. You really want to know that to make sure that what you're applying for matches with what your business plan really is all about. So I hope that this presentation gives you some insights as to the timeline that's required for licensing, and how you might want to reduce your costs in that application process, and minimize your overhead before you get that first customer. I hope this helps you. The mission of this website and the blog and these YouTube videos is to make sure that I can make your life easier, get you off to a good start, and without paying for too much expertise. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the next presentation.